Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Guys of Magic. This is Hunter coming at you by himself with another deck tech. This time, we're taking a look at one of my favorite cards from the new Jumpstart 2022 set, and that is going to be Kenessos, Priest of Thassa. Going to be bringing you guys along to show you how I think this potentially could be a really strong commander. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it. This is Kenessos, Priest of Thassa. Like I said, it is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 legendary creature, Merfolk Cleric. It says if you would scry a number of cards, scry that many cards, +1 instead. As an ability, we can pay 3, a green or blue, to look at the top card of your library. If it's a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent creature card, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't put the card onto the battlefield, you may put it on the bottom of your library. So, we are a giant sea monsters deck. We want to be casting giant Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, and Serpents for only 4 rather than their mana cost. An awesome way to cheat giant creatures out. Plus, we do have a little bit of a scry theme going on. So, we just want to be able to deal a whole bunch of damage with our giant sea monsters. So, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. We will be talking about the creatures first. So this first group is the mana producers. All these creatures are going to be producing mana for us. The reason they're important is not only do we want to ramp into awesome spells that we can throw out, but in case we do have one of our giant sea monsters in our hand, it's going to be a lot easier to cast from our hand with the amount of mana that we can produce. So first things first, these first two, Birds of Paradise and Ornithopter of Paradise, a couple flyers from Paradise. Birds of Paradise is 1 green mana for a 0/1 creature bird. It's got flying. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And Ornithopter Paradise, same sort of thing. It's 2 generic mana for a 0/2 artifact creature Thopter. It has flying, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. These two are very important when it comes to ramping in any multicolored deck because they produce any color. We are Simic this time around, so we will be using these for blue and for green. We also added a couple elf druids into the deck, Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves. They are the exact same text on the card. 1 green mana for a 1/1. You can tap them to add a single green. And finally, we did add one of the giant Krakens who just so happens to be a mana producer. This is Erixmethes Slumbering Isle. Erixmethes Slumbering Isle is 2, a green and a blue, for a 12/12 legendary creature Kraken. Erixmethes Slumbering Isle enters the battlefield tapped with 5 slumber counters on it. As long as Erixmethes has a slumber counter on it, it is a land, not a creature. And whenever you cast a spell, you remove a slumber counter from Erixmethes. You can tap it to add a green and a blue. This is a great mana producer to help us cast our other giant sea monsters if we need to. As well, we can cheat this in with our commander. It is the same cost, so it doesn't really matter in this situation. But a giant 12/12, once it gets rid of all those slumbering counters, is going to be a problem for our opponents to deal with. This next package I'm calling the Scry Guys. Our commander allows us to scry more than just what the cards say. So these next creatures, they all have scry in their abilities. So let's go ahead and just jump straight into it with the first one, Artificer's Assistant. It is 1 blue mana for a 1/1 creature bird. It's got flying. It says whenever you cast a historic spell, scry 1. What is a historic spell? Well, it's an artifact, a legendary, or a saga. Our commander is legendary. We have lots of artifacts in this deck. After doing a bunch of gold fishing with this deck, this is such a crucial 1-drop that if you can get this, you will be in really good shape. Artificer's Assistant, fantastic to scry. This other one fits on theme. This is Octoprophet. Octoprophet is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 creature octopus. It says whenever it enters the battlefield, scry 2. So not only does this come in and with our commander out allow us to scry for 3, but our commander can cheat this in with his ability as well, and that is pretty awesome. Sphinx of Foresight is 2 and 2 blue for a 4/4 creature Sphinx. It says you may reveal this card from your opening hand. If you do, scry 3 at the beginning of your first upkeep. It's got flying, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. So if we do have our commander out, the beginning of the upkeep, we are scrying 2, which is fantastic because that allows us to not be able to draw into a potential sea monster that our commander can also just keep at the top there and cast for cheap. The first ability on Sphinx is also really awesome because it allows us to kind of stack our deck in the way of where we want to draw from the opening. So if we do have one of those giant sea monsters that are on the top 3 there, we can put it on the bottom of the top 3, so make it the third card you draw on the third turn. But our commander only costs 2, so on the correct amount of ramp, you can actually get your commander off perfectly timed. Biblioplex Kraken is a brand new card from Jumpstart 2022 as well. I believe you can get this in Kenessos, the themed deck. Bibliokraken is 4 and a blue for a 4/5 creature Kraken. It says when it enters the battlefield, scry 3. And whenever Bibliokraken attacks, you may return another creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, Biblioplex Kraken can't be blocked this turn. So, with our commander, once again, this will enter and you can scry 4, which is fantastic to find those other sea monsters. And because this is a 5 mana, our commander allows it to come in for 4. And that other ability that when it attacks, we can bounce something else to our hand. We can get that ETB trigger on anything else that might have one. Like Octopuses, for instance. These last 2 Scry Guys, these are some familiar faces. They're a bit legendary. The first one is Thrassios Triton Hero. Thrassios Triton Hero is a green and a blue for a 1/3 legendary creature, Merfolk Wizard. Has the ability we can pay 4 to scry 1, then reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, draw a card. So, again, this fits in well with the theme of scrying as well as ramping. So Thrassios Triton Hero, one of the more popular EDH commanders, makes it a good addition to our deck. And what is a Priest of Thassa without Thassa herself? This is Thassa, God of the Sea. It is 2 and a blue for a 5/5 legendary enchantment creature god. It has Indestructible. It says as long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, Thassa isn't a creature. And at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. It also has an ability where you can pay 1 and a blue. Target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. So when I first started creating this deck, I wanted to see, usually, now how Magic works, is if it has another very well-known card in its title, for instance, our commander, Priest of Thassa, I go ahead and look up if Thassa fits with this card. Turns out, Thassa, God of the Sea is a fantastic include, because not only does it scry, which is what our commander wants to do, it also has the ability where we can make our giant sea monsters not be blocked, which is a lot of damage. I'm also adding a couple Shapeshifters into this deck. This first one is Glasspool Mimic. Glasspool Mimic is 2 and a blue for a 0/0 creature Shapeshifter Rogue. It says you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature you control, except it's a Shapeshifter Rogue in addition to its other types. It also has the backside where if you needed it, it can be a land that taps for blue. This is a fantastic card because we can go ahead and double dip with our giant sea monsters, get in for double the amount of damage. We're also adding Shapeshare. Shapeshare is 1 and a blue for a 1/1 creature Shapeshifter. It is a changeling, which means this card is every creature type at all times. And it has an ability where you can pay 2 and a blue for target Shapeshifter, become a copy of a target creature till your next turn. So if we really wanted to, I know it's not beneficial, but this is only 2 mana. We can, because of the changeling ability, cheat this into play from the top of our deck if we really wanted to. But that second ability, where we're allowed to make the target Shapeshifter become a copy of target creature until your next turn, we can have our Glasspool Mimic and this creature be whatever it wants to be until end of turn. So if we need something to become one of our opponent's creatures, or just if we want to double dip into damage again and become another creature of ours, we can do that as well. So let's go ahead and jump into the stuff that everybody's been waiting for. What kind of sea monsters are we adding? Let's talk Krakens first. These first 3 are some big ones. First up, we have Brynlin the Moon Kraken. Brynlin the Moon Kraken is 6 and 2 blue for a 6/8 legendary creature Kraken. It says whenever it enters the battlefield or whenever you cast a spell with converted mana cost 6 or greater, you may return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So this big old Kraken comes in as a 6/8 that allows us to bounce things. Let's say we go ahead and use Biblioplex Kraken with this guy. We get that ETB trigger again. It's just massive, massive, massive damage. Next up is Hullbreaker Horror, one of the more popular creatures in Standard at the moment. Hullbreaker Horror is 5 and 2 blue for a 7/8 creature Kraken Horror. It's got flash. It says the spell can't be countered. And whenever you cast a spell, choose up to 1. Return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand, or return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If we can cheat this out on turn 4, or even earlier on turn 3, if we ramp perfectly with our commander in play, this will be a problem for people to get rid of, because we can just start bouncing all of our opponent's things and swing in for that 7 points of damage very early. People are going to have to deal with Hullbreaker, and it's hard to deal with. Next up, Scourge of Fleets. Scourge of Fleets is 5 and 2 blue for a 6/6 creature Kraken. When Scourge of Fleets enters the battlefield, return each creature your opponents control with toughness X or less to its owner's hand, where X is the number of islands you control. So if we get Scourge of Fleet down early, this is a 6/6 that we can bounce things again, similar to Brylan. But if we get it out later in the game, it is going to be a massive issue where it can almost be a Cyclonic Rift for some people on the board. Continuing with the Krakens, we have Spawning Kraken. Spawning Kraken is 5 and a blue for a 6/6 creature Kraken. It says whenever a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent you control deals combat damage to a player, create a 9/9 blue Kraken creature token. Very simple and to the point. Our deck is running a lot of Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpents. So obviously we're going to be making some 9/9s as well. Tromokratis is 5 and 2 blue for an 8/8 legendary creature Kraken. It says it has hexproof unless it's attacking or blocking, and it can't be blocked unless all creatures defending player control blocks it. So we are forcing our opponent to say, hey, take the 8 or deal 8 damage to however many creatures you have. The final Kraken we're talking about is Icebreaker Kraken. Icebreaker Kraken is 10 and 2 blue for an 8/8 snow creature Kraken. It says this spell costs 1 less to cast for each snow land you control, and whenever Icebreaker Kraken enters the battlefield, artifacts and creatures target opponent controls don't untap during that player's next untap step. You can also return 3 snow lands you control to their owner's hand to return Icebreaker Kraken to its owner's hand. So, this is a fantastic card because you will see later we are going to be running snow lands and a pseudo snow theme to this deck. So get ready, buckle up, we're getting snowy up in here. The ability to return 3 snow lands to my hand to get this back to my hand, it doesn't say anything about having it have to be on the battlefield, so we can actually take this from our graveyard, put it back in our hand, cheat it back out, cost 1 less to cast for each snow land. It's fantastic. Freezing our opponents for a turn as well after they just swung in. Deadly. Moving on to the Octopi or Octopuses, whatever you want to say. This is the only one we're going to be adding besides the Octoprophet we saw with the Scry Guys. This is Mesmerizing Benthid. Mesmerizing Benthid is 3 and 2 blue for a 4/5 creature octopus. It says whenever it enters the battlefield, create 2 0/2 blue illusion creature tokens with whenever this creature blocks a creature. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. And Mesmerizing Benthid has hexproof as long as you control an illusion. So, gives itself a bit of protection with the illusions, and the illusions can freeze your opponent if we really needed to. Next up, we're talking Serpents. These are some mean ones. This first one is AC Tyrant of Gyre Strait. AC Tyrant of Gyre Strait is 4, a green and a blue for a 5/5 legendary creature Serpent. It says you may play an additional land on each of your turns, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So, giving us the ability to ramp there if we get this guy out early. We can start playing multiple lands per turn, and we can get some card draw going. One of my favorite Serpents they've ever printed is Coma Cosmos Serpent. It's 3, 2 green, 2 blue for a 6/6 legendary creature Serpent. This spell can't be countered. And at the beginning of each upkeep, create a 3/3 blue serpent creature token named Coma's Coil. You can sacrifice another serpent to choose one. Tap target permanent. Its activated abilities can't activate this turn. Or Coma Cosmos Serpent gains indestructible until end of turn. So Coma is going to be making a 3/3 Serpent every single turn cycle. That is your turn, your opponent's turn, your other opponent's turn, your other opponent's turn. By the time it gets back to you, you've created 4 Serpents. That's fantastic because not only do you create those Serpents, but you can sacrifice those Serpents to force your opponent to tap down their stuff, get in with all that damage from your giant sea monsters, and have a whale of a time. Or should I say, serpent of a time. Moving on to the final serpent. This is Serpent of Yawning Depths. Serpent of Yawning Depths is 4 and 2 blue for a 6/6 enchantment creature serpent. Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents you control can't be blocked except by Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. This is a staple in any sea monster deck because we are a Serpent, Leviathan, Octopus, and Kraken deck. Therefore, all of our stuff most likely will be getting in because you don't really see too many sea monster decks. So this is going to be a mean card if it gets onto the battlefield. Speaking of Leviathans, let's talk about them. This first one, Aether Squall Ancient. Aether Squall Ancient is 5 and 2 blue for a 6/6 creature Leviathan. It's got flying. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, you may get 3 energy counters. You can also pay 8 energy counters to return all other creatures to their owner's hands. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. So we got Aether Squall Ancient. That is a 6/6 flyer. That's already going to be difficult to deal with. But the ability to where we can just bounce everything back to their hands is insane. Inkwell Leviathan is 7 and 2 blue for a 7/11. It's an artifact creature Leviathan. It's got Island Walk and Trample and Shroud. Can't really say much about this one other than good luck blocking this, or targeting this for that matter. If your opponent has an island, this gets in for free. Island Walk just allows you to get in unblocked if your opponent has an island. Simic Sky Swallower is 5, a green and a blue for a 6/6 creature Leviathan. It's got flying, it's got trample, it's got shroud. Similar to the Inkwell Leviathan, except for flying instead of Island Walk. It has the exact same abilities. So we're going to get in for that 6 damage, very simple flying, trample, and shroud. The final 2 Leviathans here, we have Slyn Voda, the Rising Deep, which is 6 and 2 blue for an 8/8 legendary creature Leviathan. It's got that kicker cost of 1 and a blue. It says when Slyn Voda, the Rising Deep, enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return all creatures to their owner's hands except for Merfolk, Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, Serpents. So this one we can cheat out to be a basic 8/8, or we can keep this in our hand and pay 10 and bounce pretty much everything but our stuff to their opponent's hands. So this is another pseudo kind of cyclonic rift going here. Because this also says Merfolk, our commander stays away from that ability as well. Finally, we have Stormtide Leviathan. Stormtide Leviathan is 5 and 3 blue for an 8/8. It's a creature, it's a Leviathan. It's got Island Walk. It says all lands or islands in addition to their other types. And creatures without flying or Island Walk can't attack. So we've seen a lot of our creatures have Island Walk already, similarly to the Inkwell Leviathan. Now, all lands are islands. So we are going to be getting in for a lot of damage here, especially with Stormtide on the field. We're going to be hitting people for a lot of damage. You've seen the flying ability on our other Leviathans. Man, good luck to the opponents for trying to keep these away. But that's going to do it for all of our giant creatures, all of our creatures in general. Let's move on to the sorceries and instants of the deck. These first ones I want to talk about are the ramp spells. Because we are a giant sea monster deck, we want to be able to cast them if we need to, if we can't cheat them out. So this is a great way to do so. Rampant Growth, 1 and a green, sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put that card on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Cultivate, 2 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, review those cards. Put one on the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, then shuffle. Kadama's Reach, 2 and a green for a sorcery. It says search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. View those cards. Put one on the battlefield tapped, the other into your hand. Shuffle. And Nature's Lore, 1 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for a forest card. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Fantastic ramp cards. Can't really beat these. Always put these in any deck that runs green and you need ramp. Moving on, we got some Scry Spells. Like I said, our commander is very, very, very important to Scry, so we are going to be doing that here. This first one, Preordain. 1 blue mana for a sorcery. Scry 2, then draw a card. Again, if our commander's on the field, we're scrying 3, then drawing a card. Fantastic. Let's manipulate the top of the deck. This next one is Reason to Believe. The first part, Reason, is 1 blue mana to scry 3. Simple enough. And the second part has an aftermath, meaning after you use Reason, you will be casting this from your graveyard. This is Believe for 4 and a green. It says look at the top card of your library. You may put it onto the battlefield if it's a creature card. If you don't, put it into your hand. Just another reason why this is perfect in our deck, because we will be manipulating those giant sea monsters on top for our commander. If our commander is not in play, we're still only paying 5 for something that might cost 8. We are adding Opt into the deck. Very simple. 1 blue mana for an instant. Scry 1. Draw a card. This final Scry spell we're adding in here is Graven Lore. It is 3 and 2 blue for a snow instant. Scry X, where X is the amount of snow spent to cast this spell. Then draw 3 cards. This is a fantastic card draw and a Scry spell, especially since we are going a little bit snowy up in this deck, like I said before. This next group of cards I want to talk about are just top deck manipulation spells. Not only do we have the ability to scry with the last set, but these ones, they kind of force us to change the way the top of the deck looks in different ways. This first card, Ponder, 1 and a blue for a sorcery. It says look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. You may shuffle, draw a card. So it's similar to scrying, except you can't pitch them to the bottom. You just put them on top of the back of the order you want. Brainstorm, 1 blue mana for an instant, draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on the top of your library in any order. So this one works is if we have a giant sea monster in our hand, we can actually trade it for the top cards of our library. That way, we can get those giant sea monsters cheaper than when we would cast them from our hands if our commander is out on the field. And we are adding Worldly Tutor. Worldly Tutor is 1 green mana for an instant. It says search your library for a creature card and reveal that card. Shuffle your library, then put the card on top of it. Most likely we'll be doing this on our opponent's end step before it gets to the beginning of our turn if our commander's on the field. That way we can go ahead and cheat out something very big very quickly our next turn. Or because our commander's ability is instant speed, we can go ahead and cast Worldly Tutor if we have the mana, cheat something massive on top of the deck, pay the ability on our commander, and get that giant creature out there to block something. Moving on to the removal package of the deck. We have Beast Within is 2 generic mana and a green for an instant. It says destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. Also adding Pongify, which is 1 blue mana for an instant, destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. Its controller creates a 3/3 green ape creature token. We're adding Krosan Grip, which is 2 and a green for an instant. It's got Split Second, which means as long as this spell is on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities on the stack anymore. It says destroy target artifact or enchantment. And Reality Shift, which is 1 and a blue for an instant. Exile target creature. Its controller manifests the top card of their library. Very simple and to the point. Destroy some stuff, exile some stuff, get rid of your opponent's things, and give them lesser things. Great removal package. Adding these 2 cards for our little bit of a disruption package. Cyclonic Rift. If you guys don't know what this card is by now. Cyclonic Rift is 1 and a blue for an instant. It says return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. And an overload cost of 6 and a blue, which means you can cast it for its overload cost instead. And if you do, you can change the text, replacing all instances of target with each. So if we overload a Cyclonic Rift, we are bouncing all of our opponent's things back to their hands, allowing us to have some fun with our sea monsters moving forward. Also adding Whelming Wave, because we are a sea monster deck, it is perfect. It is 2 and 2 blue for a sorcery. It just says return all creatures to their owner's hands except for Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. So similar to Cyclonic Rift, because most likely you won't be playing a sea monster deck. I am throwing in a couple counter spells into the deck because what is a blue deck without counters? We are adding Counterspell, which is just 2 blue for an instant, counter target spell, and Negate, which is just 1 and a blue for an instant, counter target non-creature spell. Simple, to the point. Most blue decks have these two. We want to get the ability to just say no to people. So, adding these two into the deck. Let's go ahead and move on to the artifacts. These first ones are Mana Rocks. Very simple. If you guys don't have Mana Rocks, you're doing it wrong. Soul Ring. 1 generic mana for an artifact. Tap it to add 2 colorless. Arcane Signet. 2 generic mana for an artifact. Tap it to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Felwar Stone. 2 generic mana for an artifact. Tap it to add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. And we're adding Talisman of Curiosity, which is just 2 generic mana for an artifact that you can tap it to add a colorless, or you can tap it to add a green or blue. Talisman of Curiosity deals 1 damage to you. So, like our ramp spells from our Instants and Sorceries package, these are very, very important to get all the mana we need to cast the things we want to cast. I am adding some scrying and top deck manipulation artifacts to this because why not? This first one is Lifecrafter's Bestiary. Lifecrafter's Bestiary is 3 generic mana for an artifact. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. And whenever you cast a creature spell, you may pay a green if you do draw a card. So, with our commander in play, once again, that upkeep ability of scrying turns into 2, and we may draw a card if we don't actually see what we want on the top of the deck. Scroll Rack is going in here for 2 generic mana. It's an artifact. It says you can pay 1, tap it, exile any number of cards from your hand face down, put that many cards from the top of your deck into your hand. Then look at the exile cards and put them on top of your library in any order. So similar to Brainstorm, where we can just go ahead and swap the top of the cards from the deck with the potential sea monsters that we actually don't want in our hand at this moment. It's a fantastic little switcheroo. Similarly, we have Sensei's Divining Top. For 1 mana artifact, you can pay 1, look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. Also has the other ability where you can tap it to draw a card, then put Sensei's Divining Top on top of its owner's library. So that first ability, way, way, way better. It is kind of like a Scry 3-esque, where we're looking at the top 3 cards of the library and then putting them in the order we want. And finally, I'm just adding Bident of Thassa, just a little extra for the deck. It is 2 and 2 blue legendary enchantment artifact. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. And has an ability where you can pay 1 and a blue to tap creatures your opponents control. Attack this turn if able. So, once again, when I was looking at my commander, has the word Thassa in it. Bident of Thassa I felt was a really good card because not only does it give you the card draw, but it makes your opponents attack this turn if able. And if we have some big sea monsters on the board, they're more likely willing to attack your opponents, which allows you to win quicker. Moving on to some enchantments. These ones are on theme, in my opinion. First up, Merit Lage's Slumber. Merit Lage's Slumber is 1 and a blue for a legendary snow enchantment. It says whenever Merit Lage's Slumber or another snow permanent enters the battlefield under your control, scry 1. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more snow permanents, sacrifice Merit Lage's Slumber. If you do, create Merit Lage, a legendary 20/20 black avatar creature token with flying and indestructible. Like I said, we're going to be running some snow themes, so if we get Icebreaker Kraken in here, this will count as a snow permanent. And we get to scry on top of that, which is fantastic. Get our other sea monsters onto the field. It just works all around. And once we get those 10 snow permanents, we have a 20/20 flying indestructible. You can't ask for more there. Next up, Quest for Ula's Temple. Quest for Ula's Temple is 1 blue mana for an enchantment. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, you may look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you may reveal it and put a quest counter on Quest for Ula's Temple. Also says at the beginning of each end step, if there are 3 or more quest counters on Quest for Ula's Temple, you may put a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. So for whatever reason, if we accidentally have one of our sea monsters in our hand, this enchantment allows us to cheat it into play for free. Quest for Ula's Temple is a fantastic one-drop. I think this would be amazing to have in an opening hand. Aqueous Form. Aqueous Form is 1 blue mana for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature can't be blocked. And whenever enchanted creature attacks, scry 1. So, if we go ahead and throw this aura on one of our giant sea monsters, not only is it going to be going in for a lot of damage, but it triggers our commander to allow us to scry for 2, getting that ability once again to find a new sea monster to cheat into play. And finally, we're adding Sylvan Library. Sylvan Library is 1 and a green for an enchantment. It says at the beginning of your draw step, you may draw 2 additional cards. If you do, choose 2 cards from your hand to draw on this turn. For each of those cards, pay 4 life, or put the card on top of your library. So basically what this is saying is draw 3 cards, look at them, you can keep them in your hand, or you may put them back on top of your library. So basically what Sylvan Library is telling you is that you may draw 3 cards, and you can keep 2, lose 8 life, keep 1, lose 4 life, or put 2 of the 3 back on top of your library. Just another way to manipulate the top of our deck here. Fantastic, fantastic card Sylvan Library is, especially for this deck. And this final enchantment I just wanted to throw in here. This is a little extra as well. This is a Garruk's Uprising. Garruk's Uprising is 2 and a green for an enchantment. Says whenever it enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. And creatures you control have trample. And whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Garruk's Uprising, a really fantastic green enchantment that gives you card draw, as well as giving our giant sea monsters trample, get in for that extra damage. We did add a couple of Planeswalkers into the deck. These ones all focused on another similar theme here. This first one, Jace Mirror Mage. Jace Mirror Mage is 1 and 2 blue for a starting loyalty of 4. It has a kicker of 2. It says whenever Jace Mirror Mage enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, create a token that's a copy of Jace Mirror Mage, except it's not legendary, and its starting loyalty is 1. It has an ability where you can just +1 it to scry 2, and a 0 ability to draw a card and reveal it, remove a number of loyalty counters equal to that card's converted mana cost on Jace Mirror Mage. So really we want to just go ahead and keep Jace Mirror Mage here for the scry ability. We want to once again manipulate the top of our deck. Another Jace we're adding is Jace the Mind Sculptor. Jace the Mind Sculptor is 2 and 2 blue for a starting loyalty of 3. That is +2, where you can look at the top card of the target player's library. You may put that card on the bottom of that player's library. Has another ability, we could play 0, draw 3 cards, and put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in winning order. A -1 that says return target creature to its owner's hand, and a -12, which is its ultimate. Exile all cards from target player's library, then that player shuffles their hand into their library. Honestly, if you can get the ultimate here, that'd be pretty cool and would really, really put someone on a clock depending on how many cards are in their hand. But we are really, really caring about the +2 and the 0 ability where we can manipulate the top of our deck once again. A fantastic addition to this deck. The last Planeswalker we are adding is Nissa, Steward of Elements. It is X and a green and a blue for a starting loyalty of X. Has a +2 ability to scry 2. A 0 ability to look at the top card of your library if it's a land card or a creature card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of loyalty counters on Nissa. You may put that card onto the battlefield. And a -6, which is its ultimate. Untap up to 2 target lands you control. They become 5/5 elemental creatures with flying and haste until end of turn. They're still lands. So once again, honestly, as cool as the ultimate is, we don't necessarily care. We do care way more about the scrying, and we can also ramp if we needed to as well. If we know what the top card of our library is and we need the land, go ahead and play it for free. Finally, let's go ahead and talk about the lands in the deck. These first 3 are lands in our colors. First one, Bark Channel Pathway. Bark Channel Pathway can come down either on its green side, or if you need the blue, come down on the blue side. We're adding Breeding Pool, which is a forest island. It enters the battlefield. You may pay 2 life. If you don't, it enters tapped, so a little shock land there. And Rejuvenating Springs, which enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. It taps to add a green or blue. which most likely you are going to have two remote opponents because we're playing EDH. A couple lands that are on theme for the deck. Rimewood Falls. It is a snow land forest island. Comes in tapped, but it can tap for a green or a blue. So once again, this is a snow land because we are having a snow theme to the deck. Just going to make our deck hum just a little more, and it's in our colors. We're also adding Castle Vantris. Castle Vantris enters the battlefield tapped unless you control an island. Taps to add a blue. You can also pay 2 and 2 blue to tap it to scry 2. So having that ability on the card to be able to scry is fantastic. We're also adding Temple of Mystery. Temple of Mystery is just a Simic land that can add a green or blue when it's tapped. Enters the battlefield tapped, but when it enters, it can scry 1. So once again, it helps with our scry theme there. These are couple lands that everyone has in their EDH deck. First one is Command Tower. It's a land. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. And Exotic Orchard. It's a land. Tap it to add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. Very simple and to the point. Most of the time, Exotic Orchard. Someone's running green, someone's running blue at the table besides yourself. Very rare instances, and it will just tap for a colorless if need to be. And like I said, throughout the entire video, we are adding more snow lands. So we're adding 13 snow-covered forests and 15 snow-covered islands to round out our lands. But that is going to do it. Like I said, I did go ahead and run this deck multiple times. I got out some massive sea monsters every time, very early. This deck hums. It is beautiful. Kenessos is a powerhouse. I love this card so much. I think it is a fantastic sea monster commander. It's the one everyone's been looking for. Don't forget that ability on it is at instant speed, so you can cheat out some sea monsters on anybody's turn, not just your own. Check the description for the entire deck list. It is on Moxfield. Comment down below letting me know what you guys think of this deck. Go ahead and give it a try yourself. Run a bit of gold fishing on Moxfield. It's a lot of fun. Also, while you're in the description, go ahead and find links to our Instagram, our Twitter, and our TikTok. That is at Guys That Magic for all those. Follow us on all those pages. But that's going to do it. So go ahead and hit that like button if you like this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next video, hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.